Hello, I'm Ronnie Eldridge. Welcome to Eldridge & Company. I've been around the modern political world for quite a while, and I have to say I've never before seen such a mess. I asked Vincent Montalbano, a longtime practitioner of politics and a contributing columnist at the Civil Service Chief Leader, if he agrees and why he thinks this has happened. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
And we both grew up in a whole different world.
We did grow up in a whole different world.
So do you think we notice the difference more than other people?
I think we noticed the difference in a different way than other people because of our past experience. I think everybody notices the difference, whether they're people who came out for the first time last year and had a great deal of effect on the election. I think they must have noticed something to do that. I think people who generally vote and who have certain ideological leanings, I'm sure noticed it. I think for those of us who are in the business, so to speak, we've noticed it too. The time that you're referring to, where you and I started out, you know, was a time where there was partisanship, but it wasn't as sharp as it is now. There was, you know, there were lots of times during Watergate, for instance, where there was a lot of cooperation. We didn't have a system that was so influenced by money.
But you know, I feel a bigger difference than that, because of course I started earlier than you did.
A bit.
Too bad. But I came of age during the reform movement, the real reform movement in New York City politics. When we beat the Tammany machine. And where we had, and it was after the World War, so you had a lot of veterans coming back who decided they were going to make a difference, and a lot of them were lawyers who wanted to get into the politics and stuff, and it was just totally different. I mean, and you came in when? In McGovern about that time?
Yes, after
But you were not, and we were during the Vietnam War.
Yes.
And it was before Watergate.
Yes.
You know, I grew up with this whole Democratic Party tradition. I assume you did too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
My family talked always about Roosevelt and how he saved the economy and they were able to work. And that had been the core of the Democratic Party from his time until well into the 60s, when a lot of things began to split up the system. There was the Civil Rights Movement, there was the Vietnam War, there was, as I said, an increase of money influencing politics. But for that 40-year period, for that 30-year period, 1945 to 1975, that was the premier time of the Democratic Party having a consistent message and a consistent philosophy that just wrapped around workers and work.
You know, but it was also very important. Television did not play the role in politics when I started. I was the communicator between the candidate and the people living on the block that I was in charge of with the Democratic Party. I was a captain. And being a captain meant I went door to door, rang the doorbell, I talked to the voter, I handed them the candidate's literature, I told them about the candidate. They didn't see it on television. There weren't any commercials on. And that was a very important personal kind of touch, right? And I even worked at CBS in the 50s. And political advertising wasn't really big, wasn't?
Not then, no.
The McCarthy hearings were really important. Those were on television. And that was a terrible era that followed. That was before the Vietnam War. But it was a time that divided the country, and actually Trump reminds me of Joe McCarthy in his attacks and everything.
Yes.
And so does the hysteria remind me of a lot of the hysteria today.
Yes. There's a lot of stuff to unpack in what you just said. I mean, one of the things we
it's like peeling away.
Yes. Well, look, things change over time. Everything changes. I mean, one of the biggest changes in terms of people getting their political news has been the 24-hour news cycle. Now, first, that was actually associated with television. You had CNN, and then you had Fox, and you had other stations, cable news, 24-hour news. Of course, now, they're probably would consider themselves struggling a bit, and we have social media and that kind of constant communication.
And CNN, when you remind me of that, that was the first international kind of coverage.
Yes.
I remember being in Moscow.
Oh, constant international coverage.
Pardon me?
The constant daily international coverage on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the station was in Moscow.
Yes.
It broadcast there. I remember being in Russia, and Jimmy and I were at I was at a conference of city council members from around the world. So this was pretty late. I was in the council then. And I remember the fascination of being able to go to this hotel that was running CNN and seeing CNN broadcast in Moscow the same way it was there. And that was new also.
Well, yeah, I mean, we are bombarded.
That was the 24, what you're talking about, 24-hour news.
24-hour news cycle, but it was you know, relatively young. I mean, the broadcast stations had good political coverage, but there was a few of them, right? They were nationwide, etc. It's not. There are so many outlets now that provide either real news.
We didn't
or
have UHF.
Opinion. Right, and that was
the big difference.
That was
for a long time. We were just operating on the major networks, and the networks played a different role than they do now.
And cable, but
tell me what you did. I'm not going to let you go.
Go ahead.
When you were in college,
yes,
what was your political interest?
My degree is in American history and with a minor in labor studies. So labor history and American history was always a big interest of mine. I was an activist in college. And I was an activist in the anti-war movement. I was an activist in the student rights movement. I was at Stony Brook University, which is a state university school on Long Island from 1967 and 1971. That was a very tumultuous time. You know, we had the year 1968, which was a terrible, terrible year. I mean, a lot of the things that we might be feeling now in terms of the strength of our democracy was tested in 1968 as well. Yeah. It was tested probably as severely, maybe more severely, because we had assassinations, you know.
Well, but you came from Staten Island, right?
I came from Staten Island.
You grew up in Staten Island. So the Democratic Party was never that strong in Staten Island, was it? Was it when you were a kid?
The Democratic Party was stronger at that time. It's really when I started to get active in the late 60s, the Republican Party and the Conservative Party, conservative movement, was stronger in Staten Island. But the party the Democratic Party has held offices and still continues to hold.
And your
offices.
parents were Democrats.
My parents were Democrats.
And they were interested.
Yes, voting was a very important thing.
I'm always interested in how people become active, you know? Did they hear it at home?
Well, I heard it at home.
Yeah.
I heard it at home.
So did I.
Both from my father particularly, because you know, we lived in the street we lived on was the street that he was born on, so we're born near. But I also got it from my oldest sister, who was the first member of our extended family to go to college. Italian-American family, you know, grandparents came over at the turn of the last century. She was the first one to go to college, and she was the first graduating class at Staten Island Community College, and then she went on to a place called Harper College, which is now SUNY Binghamton. But my sister Charlotte was active, not in the same way that I was a few years later, but I remember her talking about the McCarthy hearings. She wrote papers on it, and you know, that and my father's admiration of FDR, which I still hold, is what I think got me really interested in being politically active, which is what I then began in college and continued almost from the day I got out.
So your first campaign was McGovern, 72?
Well, my first campaign that I actually did campaign work in was McGovern. I mean, I was involved in 68 with McCarthy and Kennedy.
Yeah. What did you do as a volunteer?
I did all the things that volunteers in political campaigns should be doing if you do that now, which is I got a list of the Democrats in my neighborhood. I was given literature. I was kind of suggested how to approach them, and I went around and knocked on doors.
So that's what I was describing.
I went around and knocked on doors, and I knocked on doors every night for a few weeks. I was a poll watcher on election day, and I had to actually challenge the incumbent borough president at that time, who was a Democrat, a guy named Al Maniscalco, because he was electioneering. He was not pleased, but you know, I was.
So you supported Clinton in this election?
I voted for Clinton in this election. I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders.
So what did you do for Bernie Sanders?
I didn't do anything for Bernie Sanders in this election. I except put a sign on my window.
Don't you think that's one of the problems with our party? Is that the role of a voter has disappeared?
It certainly has become.
There's a point to my all these questions.
I'll hit the ball when it's thrown.
I mean, you talk. Well, you are a big, I don't know what you call it, scholar, something of income inequality and the role of the financial world and the influence, and so. In a way, that's where we are now, because as a regular voter or citizen, we have no role in these elections.
We have very little role in these elections. I don't want to say no role, because I think that the role that we played is not obsolete. People still talk to each other.
Well, we're seeing it come up again now.
We are seeing it,
which is what's so encouraging.
We are seeing it come up again.
Yeah.
But my concern now is with my party, the Democratic Party, the labor movement, which I come out of, worked for DC 37 from 1979 to 1989, and I've done other stuff with other unions. The labor movement, the Democratic Party, and how that connects to workers and the future of work. And what I'm seeing is that
the basic reason you're talking about this is that what percentage of union members voted for Trump, we think? 45%?
It has it's at least 45%. It's between 45 and 49. I've seen a range in that.
That's kind of shocking, right?
It is, but that started with Ronald Reagan in 1980, and there has been in every 4 years. Sometimes it's dipped as low as 35 or 37, but generally 40% of union members have voted.
Do you think that when he took over the traffic controllers union, that the reaction to that wasn't strong enough?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think the reaction to it was strong, but I think that the labor movement, I was at DC 37 at the time. I think the labor movement was at the beginning of this period of weakness that they are experiencing. Now look, there are lots of reasons for that, and we can talk about them as we go along. But you know, among them is that the labor movement, the workers and labor unions in any society have got to have some kind of political contact. They've got to have some mechanism, a party generally. Okay, you have labor parties in other countries. Here it was the Democratic Party.
We used to have labor parties also. That's what's interesting.
We did here.
The American Labor Party.
Right.
And then the McCarthy era and the anti-communists really made its intervention there. And we had the Liberal Party, which was started by unions.
Yes.
And then gradually the Labor Party, the Liberal Party seemed to dissolve and disappear because the union leaders weren't, I don't know, why did that happen?
Well,
and did that happen at the same time?
Yes, this has all been happening since, I would say, since the early 1980s. But it's part of the whole change in the system from the type of individual work that we're talking about to money. Money, money, money. Today in the New York Times, there's an article about our governor, Andrew Cuomo, and his fundraising. And unfortunately, 99% of the contributions that he has raised $25 million from, 99% have come from $1,000 or more. So small dollar contributions, which Bernie, going all the way back to Bill Bradley, which you and I worked in Bill Bradley's campaign, and through a lot of other candidates from him all the way to Bernie Sanders, many of them raised small dollars. It's a good way to go. It's a way to get people involved, but that is still in the minority. So Governor Cuomo raises millions of dollars in contributions of $1,000 or more. Now, $1,000 is big enough, but in New York State, the contribution limit for statewide officials is over $60,000. Over $60,000. Now, you tell me, if you're a citizen, and you read on your social media, in your newspapers, whatever exists anymore, on TV, that somebody is getting contributions of $60,000, are you going to think that maybe there's a reason somebody gave that money that is not the same thing that you could do as a citizen? And that corrodes the system.
And the cynicism that comes from that. We all know why they give that money.
Yes, we do.
We know that. They write the regulations. They can call the president. They can call the governor. They can call the mayor. We know all of that. We still vote for them.
Well, we still vote for them because there's a system, and we have to work to change that.
And it's hard to make a small contribution to Andrew Cuomo, or I don't mean to point to him, but to most candidates, because his $1,000 contributions, I think in my mind means he's had a lot of fundraising dinners.
He has,
and they cost $1,000 at least, right?
Oh, yeah.
More than that for a table, you know. If you right.
Yep.
I don't get anything from them that has a coupon that I can send $10 to.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
That's the point, and that's part of what the Times was saying. But that is, and now, I did not use the word corrupt for a very specific reason. I think that I use the word corrode because I'm not talking about there being any illegalities here. Although we've seen people, go to jail because of illegal things they've done.
But then you see the Supreme Court.
But that's not endemic through the system. What is endemic through the system is the fact that the money policy connection, legal though it might be, corrodes the people's trust in government. And that is why, you asked the first question, why? That is one of the reasons why we have gotten to the point we've gotten in terms of last year's presidential election.
I don't know if corrode is the right word either, because there's been a very elaborate system formed. Most of the people who are lobbying, most of the people, and when they lobby, not like you lobbied. We have to say you were a lobbyist of a different quality and a whole different universe. But they lobby on the regulations, they lobby on the laws, they lobby on the access on projects, and they've all been trained in the government, if you think about it.
Revolving door, yes, that's yet another one of the problems.
And here we are, we're providing the training for the people that then become the manipulators of the results.
Right.
Well, of course, Trump is the major regulator. I mean, you can see what he does with regulations.
Lobbying has a purpose,
it's
and
very
a very
important.
Legitimate purpose. What the problem everywhere is, and nobody wants to give up anything. Well, why would they? I mean, if you have something, you don't want to give it up. That's the purpose of the government. Okay, James Madison in Federalist 10 said the purpose of modern legislating is regulation and control. Now, what do you think of that? What do you think of Federalists now, the Federalists who are the conservatives would think of that? I think they would probably say, I couldn't be James Madison, but he did. And that's part of what we need to do with lobbying, for instance. My lobbying colleagues, are not happy with me saying this, but I said it even before I retired. I think that anybody who gets anything or seeks anything from the level of government, lobbying, client, contractor, a developer, anybody, should not be allowed to make a political contribution to any elected official in that level of government. Now, if you don't lobby that level of government, or if you're not asking for something in that government, you could contribute to some other level, state level, federal, whatever. But if you are asking for something, you should not be giving a political contribution.
And what about if you form a PAC?
Well, and this is what
I've
been told.
We all lose our.
Well, somebody's going to form a PAC, this and that, and yes, I'm not saying that the Supreme Court has not allowed ways around it, but to advocate to not do something just because it doesn't solve all the problems doesn't make any sense to me. Lobbying is a personal business. You set up interactions with people, and a PAC is not a personal business. There are ads that you buy all over the place. Now, you know, there may be some content, or certainly you're sending a message that the people who you want to get the message get it. But lobbying is a personal business. When there is that kind of interpersonal connection, there should not be any exchange of money. It's not illegal. I'm not saying anybody or everybody is corrupt, but it does give the voters who we need to be concerned about a sense that something is wrong here. So getting rid of that is a priority.
It's not the only thing, though, that would help. And I don't think you can ever legislate against that. Let's take unions. You provide voters, or you used to provide voters.
You provide workers and voters.
And
yes.
voters, right? And so you don't have to necessarily contribute money to a campaign.
Right.
So, you know, it goes,
well,
it's a contribution.
Well,
what state did you say is the only state that regulates that? South Carolina?
South Carolina. Hard to believe, huh?
How did that happen, do you think?
I really have no idea.
You got to find out.
You could have knocked me over with a feather, but it is South Carolina.
Yeah.
Yes, and I hear that argument too about, well, the unions can communicate with their members and tell them to vote for somebody. Hey, now that is a First Amendment thing, okay? Mm-hmm. That's internal communication with your members. If the union paid to communicate with the outside world, that'd be a different story. Mm-hmm. Okay, but if they're using their resources to communicate with the members, that's an organizing thing. If they ask members to volunteer, and believe me, the unions are very, very careful about this. If they ask their members to volunteer and they volunteer, then that's something that's good for the members and good for the union, and there's nothing wrong with that. And that would go for any membership organization. That would go for any membership organization. It's not that. It's the professional interaction through which money is exchanged as political contributions. That needs to stop. Will that end everything? No. Do I think it will help out over the course of time? Yes, absolutely I do. Absolutely I do. I don't think there's any question about it. And again, because you're not solving all the problems, doesn't mean you try and approach them in one way or the other as time goes on. So the political dysfunction, going back to what we originally were talking about, political dysfunction, which is caused by money policy connection, is something that you and I did not experience to this degree when we were active. It's just not.
I still don't want to abandon the whole concept of the professionalization of the political campaigning. I mean, I never knew. When I first started, there weren't all these paid political.
Yes, consultants.
Those were volunteer roles, which made it even more important, it seemed to me.
Yes, I don't know that I would argue.
That's an internal, I guess. I don't know what.
Yeah, well,
I don't know how you piece all of these things together.
It was
to come with an explanation.
Campaigns were much simpler. I would not argue against there being professional people who manage political campaigns. But once again, because one thing doesn't mean the other. That obviously does not substitute for the parties communicating with their membership. I don't, the only communications I ever get, if I get them from the party or from the congressional campaign committees, is asking for money. And then there's a few lines about what they're going to do or, what I might not like or stuff. To me, that's not a communication. That's asking for money.
And we don't have any role in electing the leadership of the parties. We have no role.
We have no role.
No, none.
Well, we do obliquely in New York, anyway. I can't speak for other states, where we vote for the county committee members.
Oh, well, the county committee.
Right. But you're right.
And the state committee, but they don't choose who's going to run the state committee.
No, they don't. No, they don't.
It's become a tool of the candidates.
Yes.
Which is also a bad thing.
Oh, yes.
and then it gives us all the internal rife that we've seen this year in the Democratic Party.
Yes. That's for sure. There are other things that have contributed to that, but that's for sure.
So we're coming to the end of this program. We haven't even started to talk about labor and what's happened there.
Okay.
So I hope you'll come back.
I would love to do that.
And we will talk about the changes in the labor movement.
Okay.
And then we're going to try to summarize the whole thing.
Sure.
If we can. I don't know. I also want to discuss whether it's the quality of the candidates and the party's role in being smart enough to pick the candidates.
Okay. Sure.
Okay. Thanks so much, Vinnie Montalbano.
Thank you for having me.
We at CUNY TV always like to hear from our viewers. So if you have any subjects you'd like to explore or people you'd like to hear, please let us know. Write to us at CUNY TV, 365 Fifth Avenue, New York, New York, 10016, or go to our website, cuny.tv, and click on Contact Us. We look forward to hearing from you.